Hi everyone and welcome to this evening's book launch. My name's Jasmine and I'm from Carcanet, and we are of course here to celebrate Jenny King's debut collection, Moving Day, which is also a collected poems, which is very exciting after many years that Jenny spent writing. So thank you for being here with us. We're of course joined by Jenny. She is going to read for us this evening, and we're also joined by Peter Sansom. Many of you will know Peter as a Carcanet poet and also as co-director of the poetry business in Sheffield. So before I hand over to Peter, who's going to introduce Jenny in the book, I'm going to run over what's going to happen this evening. I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom by now, but just some technical things. Now, of course, we can't see you, so please do find the chat box and say hello to us. Let us know what you think of the readings. Later on during the event, we will open out to a Q&A. So there's also a Q&A box, which is a different button. Please find that. Please pop some questions for Jenny in there. Peter will be able to put them to Jenny later on. We want to get you involved in the conversation, so please do line some questions up there for us. Tonight we'll be here for about an hour. Like I said, Jenny's going to read for us. While she's reading, I'm going to be showing the text on screen. So just remember that you're in control of your screen. If you need to see Jenny bigger or the text bigger, just have a little click around and see how you can reconfigure it. I have already put the link and the code to buy Jenny's book in the chat for you. I'll pop it there now. That'll come as an email tomorrow automatically, so don't worry about doing it now. But if you want to jot it down, it's there. Otherwise, if you have any problems throughout the event, just pop it in the chat and I'll try my best to help you however I can. So I think that is just all the technical stuff sorted. So let's get going. I'm going to invite Peter to join me on screen to start this book launch. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Jasmine. It is a pleasure and really a privilege to be speaking to Jenny tonight and hosting her reading. Anne Sansom and I have known Jenny for years now and have always loved her poems since we first saw them, I think at a reading somewhere, and then at workshops that we've been part of or been running. And we've had the privilege of publishing a couple of her pamphlets, though her first came out in 1981 from the iconic press run by Peter Sansom, and which was actually a letterpress. So this beautiful book contains poems from those three pamphlets, and also from the Mandeville Press collection from our two, but a number of, as Jasmine says, it's a collector poems. Going back to, I understand that Jenny started writing poems quite young, and I'm going to ask her about this. We're going to hear 8 poems from Jenny, and then I'm going to come in and ask her a couple of my own questions. And we're hoping that you will be making use of the chat box to include some questions of your own that I'll put to Jenny at the end. But after 8 questions, after 8 poems, I'm going to ask Jenny a couple of questions, just a little chat then. And then Jenny will come back to read. And at the end, this is the kind of game show element that I've introduced myself, I have to confess. If people wouldn't mind voting for their favourite poem from this evening, not from the book, but from the book, but the only poems that have been read in the evening, during the evening. Jenny is going to read one of the poems again at the very end of the reading, and so I'll remind you of this task for you to do. I want to say, I'll read from the back of this beautiful, handsome book, that Jenny King was born in London during the Blitz. Her parents, both teachers, encouraged her to write poetry as a child and overcame wartime paper rationing to make her a book to write them in. She then studied at Newnham College, Cambridge. She took her PGCE in Nottingham, taught in Shrewsbury, and then moved to Sheffield, where she continued to teach with her husband. After taking early retirement, she did an MA in contemporary poetry at Sheffield University. As I say, she's the author of 3 pamphlets, Letting the Dark Through, Tenants and Midsummer. And it really is a joy to ask Jenny King to come and read for us tonight.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to start with a poem that goes back to myself at infant school. Milk. War's end. We were resuming in a shadowy world the burden of peace, patiently beginning. Outside the infant's dining hall, 2 air-raid shelter humps, haunted, they said, resembled graves. Milk, white among dampness, waited for playtime. Job's dairy, the bottle told me, a patriarch unseen in early morning, clattering to school with rough crates tangling his windy beard. Then a first ha'porth of learning took hold of me. It was job, like a job, like something simple you get up and do. War finished, you begin on peace like a favourite pudding. Later, I was told no, it was Job. Peace harsh on the tongue, chewy and difficult, was cold and necessary like milk. Single planes overhead at night drone like speeches. Through lanes at evening went canvassers foraging for votes. Milk, day by day appearing, washed into us by ounces, knowledge of the new world and its ways. At our next school, quiet men from big new dairies made the deliveries, anxious about their rent. And the next poem, German Exchange, is about my father, who, like my mother, was a German teacher, and after the war, soon after the war, set up an exchange with a school in Hamburg, quite adventurous at that point. And then when he was about 80 or nearly 80, they had an exchange, or not an exchange, a visit of the people who'd been involved in the exchange who went back. German exchange, the future in the past. I would like to have joined those 2 men walking by a German lake, ignoring age and deafness, language teachers resolved to be understood, trudging along. 50 years ripple by them in the dark water. They remember their friendship. Told of that afternoon, I flow back too into post-war childhood. On the kitchen table, a letter from my father to his friend with the umlaut waits to be posted. The country is reconstructing, and they're setting up an exchange between their schools. Parties of boys collect on our station platform, eager for travel. Beside loft, dusty luggage, trying out phrases of peace. Dankeschön, guten Morgen, auf Wiedersehen. Along the shoreline path, side by side in a sharp wind, the teachers are walking across the decades, laying them down, delicate trapeze, above the death of wives, departure of children, retirement, days of silence, talking, now English, now German, nodding agreement, until with a ja and a ja, they arrive at the present and pause, watching how water in its invisible flowing through the black lake makes for the sea, their thoughts jumping, hopeful, into the future. And the poem that follows, Signal, is also, as you will see, about my parents. Signal. Before the days of texting, here's my mother leaning across the sink to tap the window at my father weeding. She places one index finger across the other. Tea. Looking up, he waves, turns to survey his work, then parks the hoe. She fills the pot, carries the tray through. The nestlings gape, the ladybird's spotted badge give meaning without words. The tulip offers its stripy bugle. Yellow flowers primp the forsythia. Under the little bridge, small, dappled fish declare themselves as gravel. The lonely man hang gliding over Stanage Edge feels what the winds tell as they clear the ridge. Now, after so long, you and I find ourselves humming tunes the others started in a different room, or guessing thoughts from a slight inflection, look or trick of the eye, invited to tweetle when tea's ready. Ollie, Ollie, the old cam racers cry, to call my cocks deep in 12th century rivalry from his books. And then two poems that look back a long time, because they're no longer small, as you might guess, to our children. Waking. Dark has gone away, the child said, back to his nest. I remember how he stood in his cot, cheerful as morning. Nowadays, dark lingers, hovers above, waiting for the bad moments. The bad dawns when daylight is not enough, when God is in his heaven with the door closed. Some mornings I wake afraid, unable to prise off the claws of dark. But today the blue gathers above November's drift of leaves. Innocent cirrus clouds make off before a sharp wind. I get up, move, drink tea, talk, leave the dark in his nest. And our daughter, swimsuit. My daughter and I, upstairs in children's wear, were hunting through holiday clothes. At least I was. She had wandered away. Then suddenly she was there at my elbow with a cherry red swimsuit, age 5, which she was. Can I have this? She asked. I had assumed my choices were the best, but the next week, warmed by Italian sun, I realized at length how she grew up when, in her cherry red, with confident smile, she swam from me across the hotel pool, that short but decisive distance between my sunbed and the other side. And then the reason why the book is called Moving Day is because we moved from the house in which the children had grown up, of course, where we'd lived for nearly 50 years, to our current flat, of which more later. Many of the poems are set in the house and the garden, naturally. And this one is Midsummer. At the stair corner, where it turns for the attic, a shaft of sunlight strikes the step. Only in June, for a moment at 10 o'clock, just when sometimes the moon looks in en passant, on its way to outer darkness, like neighbours who call by once in a while to ask if we'd like a bag of runner beans, tell news of their travelling son, and ask after ours. The swifts swooping under the eaves to a hidden nest keep this a family house. From a top window I watch the infant rowan berries bob in the breeze, and I sit for a moment on the attic stairs to consider this year in its fullness before it slips away, one step at a time. The poem that follows, Starlings, is as seen from, excuse me, from what was my study in the house on the very top. Starlings. Two shiny starlings sit on the chimney, conversing in whistles under a yellow-grey sky. They have flown from a wintry place and are discussing strategy. Listen, under their breath, they are making plans for the gutter above that special spot where the rotted end of a board leaves a front door. We ask, is it about to be spring then? No good asking the sparrows who hide their nests in the hedge, nor the blackbird who favours the heart of the Portuguese lull, still less the robin who sings on and on in our garden, but nests next door. None of these will show you their private business. Our starlings, though, keep flying up and down to whichever is minding the eggs in their makeshift nest. Sorry. Not secret, not romantic or beautifully formed, flagged up by its trails of straw on the pebble-dashed wall. Then there'll be nestlings. From upstairs we shall hear them, like a class full of children chattering their way through spring. And then moving day, which, as I say, we've been in our house for nearly 50 years. So that was quite something. 1, 2, 3, and we vault across the valley and land here in another postcode, where a squirrel fossicks in the rain on the moss-lumpy roof of now our garage. And the back of my mind says, when we get home, but we are home. We wake to a mild, damp day and walls of boxes, oddments which can't be returned to drawers which are ours no longer. The unencumbered squirrel sits on its haunches and enjoys the air. We are in the sky, living among treetops in the region fir cones dropped from. Out of the window, we sense the passing traffic of radio waves. The future, crouching in the valley, opens its arms as the sun rises, and a row of pines retract their shadows and whisper of possibilities. We empty and stow, fight through our box walls like prisoners digging a way out. Morning comes, the 4th day. Birds look in at us from their neighbourly branches. We are here for keeps. Day passes. Far down the valley, an owl couches his soft notes on silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. That was a really wonderful experience hearing those poems. And we've already had one question in, but it's one that we were going to talk about. There's 1, 2, 3, and we vault across the valley and land here from 3 pamphlets to a collected poems, which seems a remarkable thing. I think the really remarkable thing for me is that you hadn't been publishing books all this time. But how did this rather handsome volume come into being?
Well, first of all, it came into being from you. I asked you one day at a poetry business workshop for some ideas as to where to send poems, and you suggested Stand, and I sent to Stand, and there was a launch of Stand in Leeds, isn't it? At which Michael was present, and then it all followed on from there. First of all, you had a reading, didn't you? This one, that's right, the kicking and what is it? Alive and kicking. That's right. So I think that was where it actually began. So it followed from there. But I mean, why I hadn't published lots of books in the meanwhile? Well, I'd sent lots of stuff to lots of busy editors at publishers, but none of them had the good sense to take them up. You see, that was the trouble.
Yes, I think you perhaps didn't network, or you didn't say anyway. But you did publish back in 1981, which I know is how that was. As I was saying, that was the Peter Sansom pamphlet.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, I went on an Arvin course with sort of dream Arvin course with Peter Sansom and George Surtees, and that was in 1979. Then Peter invited me to send some poems to him, and I did, and he took them and published this pamphlet. And here it is. Yes, that's right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, hard to get these days.
Those really beautiful productions, aren't they?
They are lovely. Yes, that's right. All sorts of famous people in them, like
Can they see which way around is it?
I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't.
Famous Seamus.
Yes,
Michael Schmidt.
That's right. Seamus Heaney, Andrew Motion, and Michael Schmidt. All these famous people there. Not you, Peter, because you're far too young.
Yes, and well, the other question I wanted to ask before we go back to the reading, we heard from Edmund there for a moment. He's going to read a couple of poems, isn't he?
Yes,
in a bit. But the other question I wanted to ask was about going further back. I think you mentioned Walter de la Mare to me, and
yes.
And a little bit about how you started writing, and then how you got onto writing more seriously, as it were.
Well, I mean, I started writing really as a smallish child because there were so many. There were poems always knocking about at school. I say poems, little bits. Fairies in the springtime, fires in the fall. Now, there's a poem to start you off, but Ed. Sorry. And there were always poetry books at home. So, I mean, it was a kind of fairly natural thing to do. And I was encouraged by my parents, who liked the idea of, people writing. And then I just went on, but I didn't write as much in my teens and when I was a student. I think I became that bit more self-conscious and probably began to, read more modern poetry and feel that I was sort of comparing myself with people who were obviously, published poets, and therefore I wasn't getting very far. But then I started up again and kind of went on from there. I went to a I think it may have been a WEA class, or anyway, extended education from Birmingham University at Attingham Park when I was teaching in Shrewsbury early on. And then they ran various, they had various readings, one of which was Seamus Heaney, who was traveling the country with his first collection, Death of a Naturalist, and I had a signed copy of that from him, which unfortunately I have lost in the meanwhile. There's always, you know, lots of courses, Harvard courses, poetry business courses, all these sort of things. So it, you know, it takes off, it takes its own momentum.
Signed copy of Seamus Heaney's pamphlet. That must be, it's going to turn up and, you know, buy you a holiday, or, oh no, you'd obviously keep it. It's an heirloom. Perhaps, do you know someone called Frances Hardy?
No.
Yes.
Ah. Frances Hardy to panellists and attendees. So nice to hear you read your poems. Is that?
Frances Hardy. Yes, yeah. I do know Frances Hardy. She's my daughter.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was thinking she might inherit that book, but yes. She sent a question through saying,
good.
So nice to hear you read your poems. Amazing hidden talents. With love from your daughter. P.S. Do you still have the swimming costume of mine?
The answer to that is no. Nice thought.
Yes. That might be, the swimming poem might be one that people ask for again. And towards the end of at the end of the reading, we'll count up the number of votes for which poem that's been read during the evening. If you wouldn't mind voting for your favourite poem from the reading, Jenny will read it again. And we'll have more questions. John Whale points out it was wonderful to have you at the stand reading in Leeds, Jenny. From John Whale. And now you're going to continue reading with a poem that Petrarch Trelawney liked very much and made poem of the year or something at Radio 3.
Poem of the week, but it's a nice thought, Peter.
Yes.
Yes, well, this one, I've been listening to Petrarch Trelawney on his breakfast show, which he does on Channel 3, on, you know, Radio 3. And I was washing up. So all I heard was him muttering to himself, were there trams in Odessa? He'd actually been to a concert. He was getting onto a tram in Manchester, and the concert had something to do with David Oistrakh, who was born in Odessa, apparently. So that was why he said that. And the fact that I didn't know any more about it than that is sort of what followed. Were there trams in Odessa? Sepia, tall house fronts pale above the dark streets. 3 tiny figures in heavy coats walking. What year is it? It is the sepia year of long ago. There was no time then. Streets were empty, shops unvisited. Inscrutable stillness, the camera's moment fixed against the flickering human eye, caged in history. No, the pictures imagined, conjured up by that creative tool, the hopeful brain, which mixes memory and invention. But such a place and such a year existed outside the mind's embroidery. There was trade, there were marriages, as in the nameless photographs which drop out of an album from your mother's youth. But then, of course, they knew if there were trams, an easy question. And then, because I sent the poem to Petrock, thinking he might be amused. He was. And so it became Poem of the Week on their Friday section. I'm going to call on my other half, Ollie, to come and read two poems which are relevant to the kind of thing he does, which is medieval history.
Hi, hello everybody. Petrock was clearly tickled pink with that poem, and Jenny was able to supply him with the slogan, "Poetry cannot be locked down," and I witness in a sense what has followed: Carcanet and the poetry business, northern powerhouses of poetry. Wilson's. Now then, back in the old house just up the road, suddenly a horse trough appeared in someone's front garden. There was a name, which was a clue. It needed a bit of research and a bit of poetic imagination. The research you see there, the 14th century Wilsons who lived on the edge of the moors. The poet was often running. Go back. Not to the folk braving December cold on the moor's edge, the sons of Will scratching a hard living, wives and children toiling from cottage to fold, but to a hilly field on the outskirts of town, 20th century. What was it doing there? Henry Wilson's marble water trough, marooned on two tall legs among the flock. Where had it stood first? Maybe beside a road, now lost in the new townscape. Then pulled from a builder's skip. Later, too unwieldy, abandoned, clinging to existence in a field like the first Wilsons. Names endure, as features do in faces down generations, given, not chosen. My neighbour bought it, lorried it home, placed it among the daffodils near his house. Tribute, it says, from Henry's sons and daughters, in a garden which was once a moor. David Hay was a lovely man and a very good friend, and I think he would have liked the next one. Hollow Way. So to begin in the middle, as they all did, picking up a journey anywhere. Packmen, higglers, carriers of all sorts, over moors, through woods, to any hamlet that would have them. If you couldn't read, it was enough to know T for Tideswell, C for Chesterfield, and a few more, traipsing through bog cotton, its white fluff up to the pony's hocks, trudging over the wind-sharp ridges, then down past starveling hawthorns, following a track worn deep, like the floor of a burrow. Shelter of a sort between earth banks, an eerie loneliness on misty days, but grand in the heat. At the end, a barn, a house or two, voices, bread and ale maybe on lucky days, else well water from the palm of your hand. A human sound, someone to talk to. Make a sale, good. A night in a barn, better. On then, over the tops to wherever it is, but you won't be stopping. Down again, and the path under the traffic of feet sinks a little each year. Winds clutch at the bank. A stylish coder, like they all are. I like it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Now, the next poem, Braille, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. The next poem, Braille, is based, I should say, set in Sheffield City Library, which many of you will be familiar with, and some of you will be familiar with the fact that the handrails that appear in the poem were stolen shortly after this by some rotten person. But if anybody is thinking of doing it again, be assured that the present ones are not anything valuable. I think they're plastic. Braille, the library's steady rustle of pages halts at the soft chuckle of a blind woman taking the whole of a table with her great brown volumes, her fingers enjoying a joke no one else can see. Readers begin to handle the corners of books here in the high room, and grainy varnish grows into contours under the soft pads of thumbs. Chairs beneath buttocks declare their forgotten shape. Outside, a lime tree opens scaly buds, dreaming of flowers. In the fruit shop, skins of tangerines are oily, scented, bananas rough at the end, then smoothly inviting. The blind woman makes for the exit, unhesitating, thanks the assistant with a smile. Her passage downstairs leaves us listeners sensing now below her brass door handle, steps on the pavement, breeze of the street. Now, the one that follows, that I'm going to read now, Hyde, is from Potterick Carr, which is a, trying to think of the right, yes, it's Yorkshire, isn't it? Yorkshire Wildlife, yes, Yorkshire Wildlife Sanctuary. And it has a number of lakes, and this Hyde is at the biggest one. If you ever go there, it's a lovely place. The only thing is that it not only has birds and other kinds of wildlife, it also has a great many insects. And you should be aware that many of these insects will set about biting your ankles given half a chance. Hyde, a wooden silence, so dark the floor is invisible, the shutters defined only by blades of sunlight. We feel our way to a bench, steadying our feet between its uprights, settle, pause. When we open up, it's the fourth day of creation. Moorhen and coot, grebe, ferrying their young, pattern the lakes glitter with black and brown, while over the teeming water mallard fly. Dazzled, we stare as though we had entered a world beyond our knowledge and come upon a different use for seeing, or as though sight itself invented this fine embroidery of clouds and ripples, of birds and air.
Very good.
and then the wedding season, a brief holiday in India. As we drove south from Delhi, garlanded lorries stood loaded with massive speaker horns, waiting like elephants for something they remembered to begin. Streamers were part of it, and little flags, ponies in pink cockades and shiny bells, and once a man in jeans trotting bareback on a white horse to go and meet a bridegroom. A sort of rose-pink joy was in the air. We had been told each year just at that time, a few days after Diwali, it was the same. We gazed, knowing we'd be home in one more week to celebrate half a century of marriage. That prodigal outlay colouring each road showed us our own first hopes, long weathered, a familiar feeling, even amid the foreignness of the place.
Lovely, Jenny. What's really wonderful about the way that you put the world together is it's all very clear. We see it, and often we hear it, but there's a depth to the poems. That's one of the nice things about Zoom, actually. The Zoom readings, where we were able to see the poems on the page as well. I think at a live event, so much of what you, because your poems, although they're completely loose, are very easy to follow, there's a depth to them that you would just miss well, I would just miss in an ordinary reading. So it's great to have the poems up on screen. I've also got some questions up on screen, and one is from Patricia Ace, which is, can Jenny tell us who some of her favourite poets are, or poets who have inspired you? It could be both, I suppose, or one and the same.
Well, poets who've inspired me. The first poet who got me writing, is going back to your earlier question, that got me writing, as you might say, as an adult, was actually Tom Gunn, which may sound improbable. A book of his called, I think it was his second collection, in which there's a poem called The Sense of Movement. I think that's what the book's called too, which I read and was absolutely staggered by and couldn't get over it. I mean, I can't quote the poem just as well, but it finishes most like that woman. The one in which I went, only my being there is different. It's, you know, it goes out of a room, he walks along the corridor and he comes back, basically. But anyway, the idea. So started from that, but that was, you know, I was 20 or something whenever it was published. But then much later on, well, Seamus Heaney, I've mentioned already, and I've always thought very well of his poems. I particularly like Seeing Things because it's so physical in a sense and practical, and yet it has so many ideas of different kinds. And I very much like Ivan Boland, whose posthumous collection came out with Carcanet, I suppose. She died last autumn. I suppose it came out this year. Anyway, recently. And poets who write about something that relates to experience and memory, and yet begin from something practical.
Yes. I'm hesitating before putting this poem to you, this question to you, which I will do. It's from Alison Fiona Chislett, and but it's impossible to answer. I think we'll see how you go. But I'm very interested in how you manage the long view with such amazing detail and precision. Well, that's worth saying, isn't it? Because you do that. But this is the thing: how do you choose what to leave out?
Ah, yes. I'm not sure that I choose what to leave out so much, because when I'm writing, I often find I'm just homing in on a detail and then on another one, and moving from one to another. I mean, some poets write, at length and chop down. Well, I mean, I obviously do some chopping down. One has to, obviously. But I'm not like, what's that Les Murray poem, The Quality of Sprawl. It's a lovely poem, but I think I rather, the long view rather springs from the details that I notice. So I don't think that leaving out is probably, in the sense of material, is probably a tremendous problem to me. Edmund always says my poems are too short. Always going on about another short one.
What a wonderful thing, and so rare to hear that. That's praise, isn't it?
Yes.
Doreen Gurry says, well, she says a couple of things actually. She particularly likes the wedding season. She loves the way that your poems tie up all the themes and land you in a different place at the end. But her question is, your observations of the world are so acute and perceptive. Do you always start with something seen?
No, not always. Sometimes start from a word, sometimes from a sound, sometimes from a rather vague memory that I can't really pin down. Often, I suppose, from something seen or experienced, but no, not always. And hello, Doreen. I know that.
Yes, it's rather nice, isn't she? This has been a wonderful reading. I'm going to read two more poems that you've decided. And at the moment, unless we have a sudden flurry of poem titles in, I think, would you mind reading Midsummer as the last poem? I don't know why. That seems to me, it has all of everything that you're so good at. Again, it's not long enough, Edmund would complain, but it's so evocative, and signal is coming in. So at the moment it's between wedding season, signal and Braille.
Right. Well,
and Midsummer. So but I think I'll make an executive. No, you make the executive decision. That's great.
You make a choice for me in a minute when I've read these two, and
yeah, that's what we'll do. I'll come back to you, but we'll hear these two.
That's right. Yes. Midsummer had the accolade of being on your website, so it did rather well that way. Naming the Weeds, which of course is a house and garden poem from before we moved. Excuse me. Naming the Weeds. Sunday, I walk the garden path where sun-bleached paving warms my feet. This border's rich confusion shows me weeds whose generations are 50 years, 100 years older than the house, the street. I name their blossoming violet, figwort, viper's bugloss, vetch. Our garden logs the years in layers of planted hopes, yet Weeds endure, old words tucked under the hem of speech, leafing up unnoticed, till a sudden colour lights the hedge bottom and reminds me, sends me back to the flower book to be sure I'm naming them right. Enchanter's nightshade, self-heal, fox and cubs. A rain shower drives me in to move aside leaf-patterned curtains and stare out over a garden full of weeds. Tansy, etym unknown, perhaps linked to the Greek for immortality, holds up its yellow buttons. I watch seasons pass while buried names like little bursts of thought spring from neglected corners. Coltsfoot, bittercress, toadflax, poppy, spurge. And finally, Chesilbank, which is a nice poem because it's full of noises and partly or answers the question about starting from something seen. This one started from something heard. Chesilbank. A tick, a tack, a shushing of numberless brown pebbles, amassing and assembling a dry hill. Sparse thistles set out for the summit, but the slope slides under them, muttering, the shore is private. It has bought up the seabed in lots and is planning to auction it off for 1 million front gardens. It rejects the term beach, but welcomes the fierce undertow of tides. Swimmers avoid its dragon clasp. Shingle is its name, a whole creature that forms and turns unceasingly. 18 miles before the shore is at peace, before donkeys and sand castles reclaim possession of their ice cream world from its growling stones.
How wonderful.
So what's the...
Yes, now, I want to, do you mind if I ask you another question? A question is coming from Michael Schmidt, which I can't resist putting to you, which is, he said, he notes that it must be wonderful to be Ed and have the continual surprise, the continual promise of a wonderful surprise. I wonder if you can tell when Jenny is about to deliver a poem. What are the signs?
Well, now, not quite full disclosure, but she sprang one on me just a few days ago, and it was one of her slightly jokey poems. And one thing that hasn't come back from the, Jenny's early history was how you used to win quite a lot of money when money was useful from the New Statesman, from the
competitions.
Yes. And I'm currently writing a book which is a translation of a Latin chronicle. I'm doing it up as a standard sort of edition. And she's produced she asked me one or two questions about it, and I wasn't sure really why she wanted to know that. And suddenly there's a complete poem, which is really rather fun and beautifully realized, about this old monk who's taken out of the grave by an angel. There's another angel poem in here, taken out of the grave by an angel and taken to Cambridge University Library for the digitization suite. And it's absolutely hilarious. And so I don't always know when a poem is coming, and it is often quite a while before I'm actually allowed to see it.
Well,
but it's always a treat when I am. Thank you for the question, Mike.
Fantastic. A couple of comments that I want to share with you. Jason Allen says, congratulations, Jenny. I first heard you at the stand reading as well and was struck by your poetry then and have become a fan. Rebecca Farmer says, congratulations. It is a joy to read your poems. Patricia A says, thank you, Jenny and Jenny's hobby. This is all to put off the grand moment when
Not recognising.
a number of people have said that it's so hard to choose, but among the poems, Milk, Midsummer, German Exchange, Signal, Swimsuit have all got votes, but Braille seems to be ahead, although a late thing, I've just seen Swimsuit. So it's up to you, any of those. Braille has got more votes and Swimsuit has an equal out in the lead, but then there's Milk, Midsummer, German Exchange and Signal. So you choose, if you wouldn't mind, to finish the reading.
Okay.
Jenny?
I will finish with Swimsuit. Perhaps I should start by apologising to this Francis Hardy, who sometimes masquerades as Francis King, which is more what I'm used to. But I do know her really. I'll read Swimsuit again, but apologies to anybody whose choice that wasn't. I need to find 30. Thank you. I can read it out of the book though. It's all right. Jasmine has produced it anyway. Thank you. Swimsuit. My daughter and I, upstairs in children's wear, were hunting through holiday clothes. At least I was. She had wandered away. Then suddenly she was there at my elbow with a cherry red swimsuit, age 5, which she was. Can I have this? She asked. I had assumed my choices were the best, but the next week, warmed by Italian sun, I realized at length how she grew up when in her cherry red with confident smile, she swam for me across the hotel pool, that short but decisive distance between my sunbed and the other side.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for such a beautiful reading, and congratulations on the publication of this book. Thank you to everyone who was here. Thank you so much, Peter, for hosting this reading and for this great conversation between you guys. And thank you, Edmund, also for your wonderful reading and interjections. It was great to see you both on screen. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. So to all of you guys, please go out and buy a copy of the book. I'm putting the link and the discount code in the chat for you again. Like I said before, that'll come as an email tomorrow, so don't panic about doing it now, and get in touch with me if you have any problems about that. So the final thing that remains to be said is please join us again. Our next book launch is on the 23rd of June. We'll be launching Richard Price's new collection, The Owner of the Sea, 3 Inuit Stories Retold, and he'll be joined by David Kinlock. So check our website for details. But thank you again for being here tonight. I'll leave the chat open for a couple of minutes so you can put your final messages in there. But congratulations to you, Jenny, and thanks so much for a wonderful evening.
And can I just thank Peter and Jasmine for looking after the technical side of things, and Michael for the book, and all these invisible people who are there listening. And it's very good to hear them all, to know they all bear hearing. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and
thank you,
goodbye, everyone, from us.